It's Sunday, November 21st, 2021. This is all about your Benjamins and your weekly mixtape and weekend review video. Hope you had a great week. As you can see down below, got a number of headlines, but honestly not a lot of commentary, at least about the more important ones, as far as important towards the economy, but I have some commentary on some of the more fun ones as well. So let's get to the headlines that may or may not be impacting your financial plan and portfolio. And we're going to start off in DC, and the House passed a $2 trillion social spending and climate bill. So that will go to the Senate, which is not known if it's going to pass, but just keeping up to date. Obviously that'll be a debate. We know that the US has a very high level of debt. This adds to it. You can see the numbers in the article as far as what the spending will be versus what they think that they can get through taxes and through the IRS. And so we never know what it's going to be, and I think that's part of the reason we have this such a high debt spending is we spend this much and we expect to get this much, and we never get as much as we expect to get. So we have this widening gap of the debt that we are building. So nonetheless, this will be a storyline. There will be debates. There will be politicians talking. It'll hit the headlines, and we'll be hearing about it as we get through this bill getting passed or not passed. But want to make sure we have that on the agenda that we talked about as well. Next up, two articles about job creation. One of them is from a couple weeks ago. I missed that week. So in October, payrolls, they rose by 538,000 new payrolls. Was higher than the expectation of around 450, so that was a good sign. And then we had some confirming information over the last week that jobless claims have been little changed, which means maybe we're hitting a plateau. Unemployment is around 4.5%, maybe a little bit higher at 4.6%. So it is at post-COVID lows, moving in the right direction, which is what we want to see, and is not the worst number that we've had in recent history. So it looks like the job market is getting a little bit better. Obviously, we all know some people who are still out of work or struggling to find meaningful employment, but the trends in the employment market are heading in the right direction, maybe plateauing a little bit. And I don't know if a plateau is good or bad. Obviously, I would love to see more people getting hired and seeing unemployment coming down, but I don't know what that plateau will look like, how long it will last, and if it will plateau and continue the good trend of jobs going up, or if it will plateau and then have jobs going down and heading with unemployment going back up. So we'll just pay attention to it. We often talk about the jobs numbers just because I think it's a good gauge of where things are going, and ultimately if people are at work, even if they hate what they're doing, if they are working and they're making money and they feel better about themselves, then that's good for the overall economy and moving in the right direction. So we'll keep an eye on that. Next up, an interesting one, Ford and GM are getting into the chip business. And I share this because we've talked a lot about supply chain over the last couple of months. That's part of the reason we think we're seeing inflation, and obviously we don't know all of the reasons. Could be the monetary policy that's been enacted, but you've got to believe the ships sitting in the ocean with things that we all want that are not making it to the shelves. Supply and demand means prices go up, so there is that inflation. So one of the big things, if you have not purchased a car or any electronics for that matter over the last couple years, at least really since COVID, I guess not a couple years, excuse me, is that there's not enough chips being produced globally, and we in the US rely heavily outside of the US for chips. So if you wanted to buy a car recently, it would take it's been taking a long time because there haven't been enough chips to run the cars. I think we don't realize all of the technology in our cars. We take it for granted, but you can have this great beautiful car with the body built, the tires on it, all of the infrastructure to it, but without the chips to make the computers work, it's not going to run. So long story short, GM and Ford are deciding to get into making chips here locally, and bringing some of that supply that we need that's international, bringing it back here, which may end up being a good thing. Silver linings and everything that happens. Maybe there's a excuse me. As you can tell, I'm getting over a head cold, and I'm not going to edit all this out because I don't have the time to do that. The silver lining may be that some of the manufacturing and the business we shipped across the globe is going to come back home because we're realizing that we're too reliant on international markets to be able to run business. So while it is good to go overseas because we get better pricing, we've learned that if we can't get those goods here because of shipping reasons or other reasons, the globe shutting down, that causes problems for us. So maybe it's finding a better, healthier balance where we have more here in the US versus shipping it out. And then we've got to figure out how do we make that more cost effective here, or prices go up to reflect that we're making more here to keep our supply chain better. So I just think it's interesting to see them do that, and good to see them make a reaction rather than just not learning from the lesson that they've learned. You think about it, there's tons of people who wanted to buy a new car this year. Ford and GM have shareholders, they have bottom lines, and they were not able to sell as many cars as they would have been able to because they didn't have the chips. And rather than just say, we don't have the chips, we don't know what to do, the fact that they're looking into having a solution for it, I view as a positive. I hate when we have a problem, we don't like something, and we don't do anything about it. So, be interesting to see how that plays out. Gonna go to crypto, and not to Bitcoin, not to Ethereum, but to the Constitution DAO. So if you did not follow along this week, a DAO is basically just a decentralized community, meaning it's all around the world, people voluntarily come in, and this DAO is organized to buy a copy of the Constitution. Now, one of the things I did not know coming into the last couple of years is that there's multiple copies of the Constitution. My friends over at Rally Road, they have a component of the Constitution that they've already sold before, but this was one of 11 or 13, depending on your sources, copies of the Constitution. It's the last one that was privately owned, and it went up to auction at Sotheby's. So this group of individuals came together, they pulled the money, they raised $40 million in a matter of days to go to the auction to try to bid and win the Constitution, so they put the Constitution in the hands of the people. And I think this is really cool conceptually. I don't know how it would have actually worked. They probably would have put it in a museum, and then you as an individual who invested in it could say, I own a share, I own a part of that Constitution. So it's a cool concept, and it's pretty cool to see people come together. Now, a tangent, one of my friends on Twitter highlighted that if we can come together to raise $40 million for a Constitution copy, why can't we come together and raise $40 million for poverty or, things that we could, lack of food, all these issues we have out there, why can't we pull our money together to do that? Which I think is interesting, and I'm sure in the future there will be a DAO that gets put together to do just that. But getting back to the Constitution, they raised $40 million, and I think one of the heirs of the way was disclosing how much they had to be able to bid on the Constitution, because they ended up losing. The Constitution went for $43 million to a investor named Ken Griffin, who is very well known in Wall Street, runs a fund, and I also kind of find somewhat comical, and I don't know if it's a good comical or bad comical, but just ironic comical, whatever it may be, that you had this group of people who wanted to get together and beat the big guys, if you will, those who have all the power. They wanted to get the Constitution, own it, the symbolism behind it, only to get beat out by a Wall Street billionaire. So Ken Griffin owns it. He's going to put it in a museum to be able to be seen. But I think that what we're seeing here, and one of the things that excites me about this whole crypto space, if you get me one-on-one and we talk about it, is the ability for people to have more control. They can have more power. Think about it. A group of individuals got together on the internet and raised $40 million after a goal. And if they would have played their cards differently, maybe they would have won that Constitution copy. But nonetheless, the power is there. We're learning how we can come together as individuals to enact change, to win a Constitution copy, whatever it may be. And you look at other things that have happened over the last couple of years, the AMC and the GameStop saga. The Reddit investors blew up hedge funds. They got together, whether or not it was legal or not, different story. I don't want to see that happen all the time, but I really get excited about seeing the fact that we as individuals who have been capped from a certain standpoint of what it is that we're able to do, being able to come together thanks to the internet and now thanks to this crypto world and enact change and have some more control. So I'm really excited about that, and I think the whole concept of it was pretty cool. Now what would have they really done and what would matter in the grand scheme of things? Probably not much, but I just thought it was a very cool thing to see. Speaking of the Constitution, and everybody wants to complain, or a lot of people want to complain about what's going on here in the US, and it's not perfect. It will never be perfect. We'll always have our flaws. But I just want to point out how fortunate and blessed we really are to be here in the US, and highlight the story of Peng Shuai, who was a tennis player over in China, who, when I got ready for this mixtape, got my articles ready, was still missing. Then within the last handful of hours, she actually showed up at a youth tennis tournament. But long story short, she came out on social media and said that a former vice premier coerced her into a sexual relationship, and she went missing after that. So the fact that a highly known individual over in China can say something, factual or not, that is not liked by the government and all of a sudden go disappearing is scary. you think about all the things that are said on social media today, that there's no consequences for it. We're pretty fortunate to have that freedom of speech and the freedoms that we have. So while it's not perfect, got to take a look at what else is going on out there and realize how fortunate we are and count the blessings that we do have. And it's not the first time this happened. I don't know if you remember a couple years ago, or I forget exactly how many years ago, Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, same thing. He came out and spoke against the Chinese government about business, and he disappeared for a while. And he was, at the time, one of the richest men in the world. So again, we have our problems here. It's not perfect, but it could be a totally different situation. And those complaints that we love to shout out, we wouldn't be able to shout out because we would go missing. So I thought that was a good compliment to this idea of going up as individuals, able to buy a copy of our own Constitution that gives us those freedoms. Meanwhile, across the globe, there's this woman who spoke out and disappeared. So that is something I felt was interesting to share. And finally, this has nothing to do with finance or your financial plan, but I thought it was interesting. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal about whether or not AirPods are out, bringing back the wired connected earbuds that we grew up with on the iPhone. So for those of you that are into fashion, it might be time to put the AirPods away, close these bad boys up and put them away, and bring back the wired earbuds, because that's what all the cool kids are doing. So I thought it was an interesting article. I thought it was pretty funny. I do like fashion. I don't know if I'll make the switch. I do like my AirPods. So I don't know if I'll be switching back and forth, but if you want to look cool and you want to look trendy, then that may be the style to go for today. Alright, so that's it. A little bit longer than usual, but I had a few things I wanted to go out on and elaborate on. Again, always appreciate you tuning in. Feel free to leave some comments in the comments below, share. If you're watching this on YouTube, head over to All About Your Benjamins to read the mixtape down below, and we will see you all in the next episode. Have a good one.